This is Dr. H.M. Arif Nadvi, Head Department of Languages in Caravan University. Honored to share my humble presentation with you on the topic practical criticism. I would like to give a brief survey to practical criticism. As you are my learned audience, I would like to give a brief survey to practical criticism. Dear audience, much has been written, much has been studied, and much has been discussed about the topic, and I'm not going to add something new because I supposed to deliver my discourse to the audience who have background knowledge of the topic, of the subject, but I would rather like to share my views on the topic. Dear audience, the topic is much more important in many terms. Practical criticism. In Urdu, it is called तनक़ीद, तबसरा और आमली तनक़ीद और तबसरा. But I would like to discuss practical criticism in English literature. So first of all, I would like to focus from where the term has been derived, has been originated. So the word criticism is originated from the Greek word kritikos, meaning ability to determine, evaluate, examine, analyze, and to judge. And historically speaking, the earliest discourse of theoretical criticism is well known and a masterpiece by Aristotle. It is known as Poetics. And the most influential theorist of criticism in the history of literature, in the history of criticism, are Longinus, who belonged to Greece, Puy from France, and Horace from Rome. Now, coming to the point, why and when it has become the part of the academics, part of the academia, and why it got attention of the scholars, especially the Cambridge scholars. So the practical criticism as a part of academic study got attention of Cambridge scholars, after the First World War and became the part of syllabi at Cambridge University. They made efforts, scholarly efforts, to replace a highly generalized metaphorical style of criticism by specific methods of analyzing a literary piece. We have I.A. Richards, F.R. Lewis, William M. Sonant, and L.C. Knights. These are some of the great figures that were much influenced by T.S. Eliot and Freud. Now, coming to the concept of practical theory, okay, and what was the approach of Cambridge scholars towards practical criticism? The Cambridge scholars believed that the evaluation of any poetic creation is based on the fact that it must exhibit this association of sensibility and express the emotional feelings through not subjective but objective correlative. It should be a product of unified sensibility. They believed that the analysis was not only a literary device for precise description of the literature, but also is a process through which the readership may be able to cultivate literary awareness. Analysis is the part and parcel of any literary development. Literary analysis, as you know, any poem is the result, is the outcome of a complex of associated feelings and unique thoughts. They focused on the fact that the critics should concentrate on discovering complexities, ambiguities, and multiplication of readings, multi-layers of reading. A poem offers obviously various layers of effect for interpretation. Now, first of all, we should define it. What is it? Okay, and what is the approach of practical criticism to the literature? So, in terms of definition, it can be defined as this art is an analytical method to criticize a literary piece or close reading of a specific text. Close reading of a specific text, emphasizing and responding to the features and characteristics of the words on the page. This art is a wonderful tool, a wonderful lens to scan the text, which gives an angle of the possible aspects or perspectives of any piece of literature. Now, criticism can be categorized in two parts, in two types. Number one, impressionistic criticism. It is to represent the explored ideas in the passage by expressing the responses that the literary work suggests for its readership. Number two, judicial criticism, as the very name suggests, ability to give some intelligible version. Now we come to the objective of practical criticism. It is very important. It ensures that a reader will judge about a piece of literature that he or she has never come across it before. He will be required to look very closely at the actual words being used. He will be required to describe specifically the effects of a piece of literature. He or she is to pay a close attention to figurative language, prosody, and literature theories, which are very particular to the given forms. T.S. Eliot, great critic, suggests in these words. He says, we should begin to learn to distinguish the appreciation of poetry from theorizing about poetry, and to know when we are not talking about poetry but about something else suggested by it. So, coming to another topic, that is analytical approach to practical criticism. This is very, as the topic suggests, this is a very sensitive task, delicate task, important task. The close study of particular text has no resemblance with syntactical or morphological structure. It is definitely that of delicate acumen and assessment of the experience in and behind the words that are being analyzed. To quote F.R. Lewis, that famous quote, analysis is the process by which we seek to attain a complete reading of the poem. Critical analysis is a constructive or creative process done with patience. It requires patience. It requires rigorous study of the subject. It is a more deliberate in nature to go through the process of creation in response to the poet's words. It is fact that the analyst helps the readership to pursue form and life in what perhaps at first appears to be a heap of unrelated fragments. Now, how to begin how to begin with the analysis of a poem. So, to begin with a poem, it is essential to keep one question in mind. The question is, what kind of a poem we are dealing with? Very important question to begin with, to start to analyze. The question is, what sort of a poem we are dealing with? First of all, we must determine the nature of poem, and the answer to this question requires some discussion of the methods in which the poem is written, the poem is composed, the poem is created, and the historical background, the historical backdrop in which the poem came into existence. If a poem revolves around a contract between a writer and a reader, an agreement about the conventions being implied, the knowledge of these principles is the first prerequisite in the way of understanding the poem, in the way of comprehending the poem. Okay, so the reader, therefore, the reader means the person who is going to analyze. He must have some background knowledge of the author's life, not life itself, but the author's times as well, and of the circumstances in which the poem was created. But it is not necessary to introduce into the analysis biographical or historical details that have no relations to readers' expositions of the poem. The analyst should make an effort to find some association between the total effect of the poem on the sensibility and the actual words being used. It is very important that the reader should analyze something to which his or her own sensibility has really responded. This is very important. This analysis certainly will offer a sincere and valuable appreciation. The delight, the pleasure of the poem comes from its treatment of experience, and so the analysis should aim to deal specifically, precisely with the whole meaning, total meaning. As the reader examines the poem, he or she should be able to imagine precisely about the effect of the meaning on himself or herself, and this exact thought, this exact imagination, this exact concept, perception should increase his or her appreciation of the poem's force. The analysis of themes should go parallel with an examination, evaluation of techniques, methods. So there are some important questions which a reader, analyst should consider while doing an exercise, important exercise in practical criticism. These are as follows. So first of all, the question must be in mind: what is the effect of the understanding of the lines? Okay, what is the effect of the understanding of these lines? Effect. How does the poet use rhyme and rhythm is an established form being implied, such as the sonnet or black verse? Or what types of images are being implied and how are they arranged? Or how are the ideas developed? Or what is the poet's tone of voice? Or how do the words build up that complex impression we received on first reading of the book? Or what has been achieved? What has been achieved? This is very important. What has been achieved by reading this poem? Or there any flaws in the poem? This is very important on the part of analyst. Are there any flaws in the poem? And last, is the delight, is the pleasure reduced by any lapses in techniques? So these are some of the questions they must be kept in mind while doing exercise on the way of analyzing the poem, literary piece of work. So now I would like to move on with one more aspect, and that is essential components of practical criticism. The reader must give evidence of understanding. He must produce that he or she has understood, he or she has responded, he or she has comprehended. Now here comes reader response theory, evaluation and discernment of the passage. This only takes place when he or she actually took delight in the literary piece. So what are the ways to exercise? Now we should move with this aspect. What are the ways to exercise in a piece of practical criticism? The critic should not analyze the given passage in the light of his or her preconceived literary theories. No, he should judge the literary piece on his or her own merit. A practical critic should be familiar with a proper critical personality, but it should be wary to use the jargon of criticism. And now, briefly speaking, I am coming to the significance of importance of practical criticism postmodern era in literature. The importance of practical criticism is an essential part of the examination evaluation. It has been recognized today. Close scrutiny, scanning of literary pieces has been a normal part of many universities' courses. Questions such as analyze the technique and meaning of the following poem are set in university examinations. Much importance has been attached to practical criticism because it is a training in enjoyment. It awakens proper aesthetic response in a student and enables him or her to make impersonal judgments of literary piece he has never seen before. Now we have another aspect of discussion, and that is approaches to poetry from critical point of view. In practical criticism, an analyst, a reader A responsible reader requires to approach poetry in the uh, in the in the major or highlighted perspectives, because if you don't know the nature of poem, if you don't know the nature of poetry, how should it appeal, how should we have to approach, okay, we cannot come to any conclusion. So first of all, we should have an approach to the nature of poem properly, because we must realize the fact that poetry appeals to the imagination and gives us delights if it is recognized in a required parameter. It sharpens, the poetry sharpens. This must be kept in the mind when exercising the analysis of the poem. The poem sharpens appreciation of nature and intensifies pleasure of common experience and human sympathy and universal human response. The poet communicates attitudes, feelings, and interpretations and ideas. It appeals to man's aesthetic sense, his awareness of beauty. So, there is a famous quotation by T.S. Eliot, who defines poetry is not the expression of personality. Poetry is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. The poet has not a personality to express, but a particular medium, which is only a medium and not a personality, in which impressions and experiences combine in particular and unexpected ways. So, unless or until you do critical appreciation on your own, you cannot comprehend properly. So I would like to suggest a poem to analyze critically, to do critical appreciation, and the poem is, I will read: tears, idle tears, I know not what they mean. Tears from the depth of some divine despair rise in the heart and gather to the eyes. In looking on the happy autumn fields, I would not tell who has written this poem. It is you to find out who is the writer of these lines. You are required to do critical analysis, critical appreciation, applying all the methods, techniques, figurative language, figures of speech, and many things. It is you to find out. Thank you very much for watching us. Thank you.